In July last year, China officially entered flood season. But for millions across the country, disaster had already begun long before the calendar said so. What unfolded was not a single event, but a slow-moving collapse, spreading from northern industrial belts to southern farmlands, engulfing everything in its path. This was not just flooding, it was a chain reaction. By July 4th, authorities admitted that 320 rivers had exceeded warning levels. But that number, stark as it sounds, barely scratches the surface. Behind it lies something far more dangerous, a systemic failure centered around one massive structure that was supposed to represent control over nature, the Three Gorges Dam. For decades, the dam stood as a monument to power, not just engineering power, but political ambition. What was sold as proof that China could reshape rivers, tame floods, and dominate the natural world. When it was completed in 2003, state media boldly claimed it could withstand a flood that happens once every 1,000 years. Quietly, that promise was later reduced to once in 100 years. And now, with the dam itself under maximum red alert, even that downgraded claim is collapsing under pressure. As water surged beyond safety limits, the dam opened up to 11 floodgates at once, unleashing 44,000 cubic meters of water per second. The scale is hard to grasp, enough to fill Westlake in 5 minutes, and hundreds of Westlakes within a single day. This wasn't just a release, it was a forced eruption. And for those living downstream, it didn't feel like protection. It felt like betrayal. What was happening wasn't flood control, it was flood redistribution. Water was being redirected, not eliminated. Upstream regions were shielded, while downstream cities absorbed the impact. It was a calculated decision, one that turned natural disaster into engineered catastrophe. Dr. Wang Weiluo, once involved in the dam's planning, has spent years exposing what he describes as a deliberate illusion. According to him, flood control was never the dam's true priority. The real objective was power generation and economic return. The original engineering guidelines were clear. During flood season, the reservoir should be lowered to 145 meters to create buffer space. But that didn't happen. Water levels were kept artificially high to maximize electricity output, leaving no room to absorb incoming floods. When the rains came, there was no safety margin left. The only option was emergency discharge. Wang calls this a gray rhino, a massive, obvious threat that everyone sees coming, yet chooses to ignore. And the danger doesn't stop at one dam. China has nearly 98,000 reservoirs scattered across the country. According to Wang, a large portion of them fail to meet basic safety standards. Sudden water releases, often carried out in the middle of the night, have quietly become routine. No warning, no accountability, just water, rushing forward in the dark. At the same time, concerns about the Three Gorges Dam itself continue to grow. The government has acknowledged that the structure has experienced slight movement, but independent observations suggest deeper problems: structural stress, micro cracks, and increased seismic activity triggered by the sheer weight of the water it holds back. In some areas, earthquake frequency has increased dramatically, up to 30 times higher than before the reservoir was filled. Even NASA confirmed that the mass of water stored behind the dam has had measurable effects on the Earth's rotation. This is no longer just infrastructure. It is a force large enough to influence the planet itself. But the cost of the project goes far beyond engineering risks. It is written into the lives it displaced. The construction of the dam forced at least 1.3 million people from their homes, the largest relocation in modern history tied to a single project. Entire cities vanished underwater. 13 cities, over 100 towns, more than 1,000 villages, erased. History, culture, and memory disappeared with them. And for many of those relocated, the promises of a better future never materialized. The wealth generated by the dam flowed outward, powering megacities like Shanghai, while those who sacrificed everything were left behind. China has seen what happens when dams fail. In 1975, the collapse of the Bangqiao Dam triggered one of the deadliest disasters in human history, killing an estimated 230,000 people. That memory still lingers, even if it is rarely discussed. Scholars like Michael Oslin have warned that if the Three Gorges Dam were to suffer a major failure, whether structural or operational, The consequences would go far beyond physical destruction. It would strike at the core of political legitimacy, because the dam is more than a project. It is a promise that the state can control chaos, that it can protect its people, that it knows what it is doing. If that promise breaks, everything built on top of it begins to crack. And now, as the Yangtze River continues to rise, that promise is being tested in real time. The timeline of destruction moved with relentless speed. Between June 29th and 30th, torrential rain slammed into the Sichuan Basin. Late on the night of June 29th, the Zaipingpu Reservoir near Dujiangyan began releasing water. By July 3rd, Chengdu was already feeling the consequences. In Guizhou's Rongjiang County, two major floods struck within days, June 24th and again on June 28th. The second wave was worse. Rescue teams had no choice but to carry out urgent evacuations as water surged through communities. It was described as the worst flooding in 3 decades. In Hubei, the situation escalated overnight. Between June 30th and July 1st, Xianfeng County was hit by a sudden and violent flood that swallowed entire areas before people could react. The speed was the most terrifying part. There was no time to prepare. On July 3rd, in Henan Province, eyewitnesses in Taiping Town described how a road disappeared under rising water in just minutes. Not hours, minutes. Hunan had already been battling rising water since mid-June. Entire towns like Badagongshan and Longshan were overtaken. Hundreds of thousands were affected. Tens of thousands were forced to flee. By July 12th, even Hangzhou's West Lake, one of China's most iconic landmarks, recorded historic rainfall. Then came July 15th. At 2 a.m., a sudden downpour hit Xinzhu village in Lijiang. But what made the situation far more dangerous was not just the rain. It was what happened behind the scenes. A decision had already been made. Days earlier, on June 27th, state media had quietly announced a policy. In order to protect key areas, floodwaters would be redirected into lower-lying regions. It was a chilling admission. A strategy of controlled sacrifice. Not everyone would be saved. And soon after, the plan was put into action. The Tuoco hydropower plant opened 7 floodgates in succession, sending a surge of water into Rongjiang County. Residents had no warning. Social media posts later confirmed what had happened. Water released without notice, without preparation, without protection. This was no longer natural disaster. This was managed destruction. And all of it was building towards something bigger. On June 30th, massive flows from the Min and Jinsha rivers converged on Yabin, pushing enormous volumes of water toward the Three Gorges Dam. Pressure began to mount rapidly. By July 2nd, the reservoir had already risen above safe levels. Inflow exceeded outflow. The dam was filling faster than it could release. By July 7th, the situation had reached a critical point. Water levels surged past warning thresholds, nearing the dam's maximum design capacity. Thus, this was the turning point, the moment where risk transformed into real danger. Behind closed doors in Beijing, emergency meetings were reportedly held at the highest levels. Orders were issued with unusual urgency: prevent failure at all costs. The highest level red alert was declared. Military units, armed police, and engineering teams were mobilized around the clock. The Southern Theater Command entered a state of readiness. Forces quietly gathered around the dam, preparing for a worst-case scenario few were willing to speak about publicly. But to reduce pressure, authorities had only one option left: release more water. Experts described it bluntly, like drinking poison to relieve thirst. Every cubic meter sent downstream carried consequences. Cities like Yichang, Wuhan, and Nanjing were pushed into emergency mode. The burden was simply shifted. The dam had to survive, no matter the cost. And the cost was paid by ordinary people. Homes disappeared, livelihoods collapsed, lives were lost. Yet from Beijing, there was silence. Even as officials confirmed that hundreds of rivers were flooding across the country, the absence of top leadership was striking. No direct presence, no visible accountability. Nowhere was this more evident than in Xianfeng County. The flood came in the middle of the night. There was no warning, no evacuation order, nothing. By the time a red alert was issued at 6 a.m., it was already too late. In just 12 hours, rainfall shattered historical records. And yet, the official response focused not on rescue, but on narrative control. Authorities claimed tens of thousands had been evacuated and that there were no casualties. Yeah, but local accounts told a different story. Eyewitnesses reported deaths, injuries, families trapped. One resident described a couple who lost their lives in a residential area known as Romantic Castle. Others were taken to hospitals. But the full truth remains hidden. Because in this crisis, information itself became another controlled resource. And as the waters continue to rise, one question grows louder. How long can a system built on control hold back forces it no longer fully understands? The flood is no longer just in the rivers, it is everywhere.